Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last of our Friday sessions, and we have a very special guest, Eryn BB, and she is a longtime friend of mine. We met in Kamloops because our children knew each other, and after, I think it was about 2 years, Eryn and I all of a sudden realized we have a mutual friend back in Ottawa who is one of my good and closest friends, and he was in the diving community, and that's where Eryn and my friend got together. Eryn is the most decorated person in the water from Alberta, as far as I can tell, in any part of the water, but she was a 2-time Olympic diver, as well as a world champion, a Pan Am Games champion, and a Commonwealth Games champion. So, what we are going to do now is show you a short video to show you the kinds of things she used to do on a routine basis. Eryn BB.
Sorry, there's no sound, guys. It'll just say what he told you. I mostly just wanted to show you, for those who are unfamiliar with diving, what it looks like. That was Pan Am Games in Winnipeg. And no, I don't do any of this stuff for fun anymore. I don't even think I fit into the Speedo I once wore back in the day. It's my mom and dad. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Mark, and thank you for having me here today. Happy Friday, Soapy. How's everybody doing? That's what I like to hear. So is everybody surviving their first semester so far? No. That's not, well, okay, for those of you who didn't answer because you're not certain, I think that's okay because the weekend's just a few hours away. I remember what that first university semester and first year was like, so when I was asked to say a few words to all of you today, I was actually really honored. That said, I'm still often surprised when people ask me to say a few words about my Olympic experiences, because I just look back at that period in my life as just another chapter in my life. Kind of like a really cool job I had, years ago, performing on the world stage, sometimes in front of thousands of spectators, as you saw from those videos. I guess you could call it like a super wet internship, where I wore a one-size-too-small Speedo to the office every day. And that was legitimately it. It was like hair slicked back wet, standing on a pool deck, cold, forever fighting off a wedgie. And yeah, that was pretty much my day, every day, for a period of about 11, 12 years with regard to diving. So that might sound a little bit intimidating, but what is actually way more intimidating for me, even though I braved the Olympics twice, and I heard all kinds of challenging feedback through the course of my career, I still believe that the most terrifying words in the English language are, would you please say a few words at our event? It doesn't matter how much confidence I had standing on the end of the diving board in that little Speedo. I still believe that, for me, speaking to a room full of people is always going to be a more daunting challenge. And I think, I don't know, by show of hands, how many people find public speaking or presenting a little bit intimidating? Okay, so that's honest from most of you. When I'm presented with an opportunity whereby my first reaction is a resounding, heck no, I'm not the right person for this, I've learned that it's probably best to say yes and then just figure it out after the fact. That's why I'm here today. It's exactly what brought me to TRU this past year. Unfortunately, for me and for you, no Speedos required for this performance. So As a learning strategist with the Faculty of Student Development here at TRU, my primary role is to coordinate the PACE program, which is the PAC Academic Edge academic support program for our Wolfpack athletes. How many in here are familiar with PACE? How many are our Wolfpack athletes with PACE? Okay, so there's a few of you I've seen at study hall. Excuse me. We have a team of athlete peer mentors, for those who are unfamiliar, who are upper year students, and they're committed to helping their teammates with school. So whether that's at the study hall on Monday nights or on the road, they tutor them, support them, refer them to other resources on campus if they need it. And the intent of this program is just to help our student athletes be successful off the field of play as well. So for me, this is like really a full circle moment because I get to give back to and support the athletes that I once was. Prior to this role, I worked over at Pacific Sport Interior, BC, which is a regional center for Canadian Sport Institute here in the province, in an athlete coach services capacity for 6 years. And before moving to Kamloops, I was part of an entrepreneurial startup retail business in Calgary. And I was tasked with a really fun project, being able to help build and oversee a new division of that company. My journey has taken me in many different directions over the years. Some of it's been very successful. Other parts of it, not so successful at various times. As you embark upon your first year at TRU, pursuing a business degree, I feel it's important just to start thinking about what goes on behind the scenes if you want to be successful, because there's a little bit more to it than you think. When we talk about success and leadership, there are many differing perspectives. And the truth is, all of them are going to be right, because it's perspective, it's opinion. For me, leadership is about fostering growth and development of personal, social, and academic potential in others. It's about the process of achieving success, striving for excellence, not perfection. There's a big difference. Preparing for this talk and my first keynote a few months ago really provided me an amazing opportunity to reflect upon the experiences I had to achieve my goals, which I actually hadn't done for a while. So I'm just sort of going to tell you a little bit about my journey through sport. The first spark was ignited for me as a 7-year-old little girl, growing up in the greatest sport town of all time, Edmonton, the city of champions, the home of Wayne Gretzky, the great one, and the Oilers hockey era. So admittedly, though I've lived in BC for 7 years, I'm forever going to be a great one and hockey fan, a great one and Oilers hockey fan. And I totally apologize to the Canucks fans in the audience. It's just that the 80s were a really epic time to be a sports fan in Edmonton, right? We even had our own sign at one point that said City of Champions. So I know not everybody will agree with me, but that's where my start was. In the summer of 1984, so I'm going to date myself because I was a 7-year-old girl, it brought me a new icon to admire, and that was a gymnast named Mary Lou Retton. So she was the first American woman to win the all-round gold at the Olympics. And I was in awe. I remember being glued to like our little black and white TV. It had the rabbit ears we had to adjust for reception. And I watched this girl, 5 foot nothing, probably smaller than that, do perfect 10 vaults and do something that had never been done in history. And for those of you who don't quite comprehend the magnitude of that, this moment for her, and as a little girl watching it, like she was America's sweetheart. Like it was a huge deal. She was on the Breakfast of Champions Wheaties cereal box. So at that time, I was obsessed with all things Olympics, all things Mary Lou, and I totally wanted to be that Wheaties box girl. Like this is how I envisioned it. And I know it seems silly, but you gotta remember you're 7 years old and you wanna be this girl. And I remember looking at my mom and dad that summer as a 7-year-old, and I said, I'm going to the Olympics someday. And I will forever appreciate that my mom and dad didn't laugh at me and tell me that was silly. They just said, okay, dear, and they signed me up for gymnastics. that kicked off a 17-year journey for me chasing my dreams. Gymnastics was a great fit for me because I was a super high energy, really klutzy kid. I had multiple broken bones, stitches, you name it. I was in the ER with my mom and dad all the time. All of those injuries usually had nothing to do with organized sport. So even to this day, when my friends follow me around, I'm the person who stubs my foot on a speed bump in the Walmart parking lot and garage sale everything in my hands. And they're like, holy crap, I can't believe you were ever an Olympic athlete. So that for me, I was super klutzy, and I think signing me up in sport and other activities was for sure an effort for my parents to offset or reduce the number of trips my parents made to the ER. By the age of 13, I was already training 20 hours a week in gymnastics. Loved the sport. However, even at that age already, my body was breaking down and failing me. So Osgood Slaughters took me in a new direction. How many know what Osgood Slaughters is? Okay, so that's not like a name of a fancy European coach. It's actually like a knee condition that's really common in those who are doing jumping, running sports, really common in gymnasts. So because of the twisting and flipping and aerial awareness that I had from gymnastics, it made for a really easy transition over into diving. And actually, very commonly, a lot of gymnasts will go into diving, especially when they're injured. So I tried both sports for one summer, and then ultimately chose diving. I don't know, sometimes I wonder, maybe it chose me. So you guys saw a little bit of the diving. The reason I wanted to show you that video, sorry, I don't want to cough into the mic, excuse me, was because for those unfamiliar, I wanted to show you what diving looks like at an Olympic level. But this too, I want to see if my little pointer works. There, it kind of works, but it doesn't really show up. Okay, so the diving boards, I want to show you what my daily training environment looked like. So when we're not doing the flashy, cool stuff you saw in the video, this is what we're doing. Usually 3 or 4 hours a day of the 6 hours a day I train. So those diving boards are called pit boards. They're just a diving board on land that has a mat the same level, and we do all of our somersaults, twists, jumps, tons of simulation. In the background, you can see the trampoline, and over top of the trampoline, there's like a spotting apparatus. There's a little belt in there that we would wear around our waist, and our coach would work the spotting apparatus so that we could flip and twist and do a lot of stuff head first without breaking our neck. So that was a plus. Spent most of the dryland time on one of those two apparatus. And then in the background, you can see the diving boards. But let me ask you this, how many of you have done a dive before and landed flat? Oh gosh, there's more people in this room that have wiped out trying to dive. Does it hurt? Does water hurt when you wipe out on it? Okay, so the one thing you can't see is in the background, underneath the water surface at the bottom of the pool, there's something called a bubble machine. And what it does is it blows water up from the bottom of the pool. It breaks the surface of the water and makes it all pillowy soft. So when you eat it off a 3-meter springboard or 10-meter, it doesn't hurt so badly. We don't have one of those in Kamloops, so you might not have seen it in action, but that is how most divers coming into the sport spend a lot of their time, especially the bubble machine. So the first 5 years of the sport, for me, as I said, I got really well acquainted with the bubble machine, spent a lot of time wiping out. I was scared, like every single day that I went to practice. And to be quite honest, that feeling never went away. Even until I performed my very last dive at the 2000 Olympics, I was still scared. I was super respectful of the fact that if I made a mistake and wasn't paying attention, I could hurt myself. So diving, much like gymnastics, is super scary. It's really easy to make a technical mistake. And in all truth, people have actually died in the history of the sport. Not on springboard, but there's a couple divers that have hit the tower and died. So you just always have to be paying attention because your body's a tool. And if it doesn't work, or you damage it, your career can be over instantly. luckily, I had great coaches along the way who helped take kind of the sting out of that struggle so I could have some fun through those early learning years and days. But the reality is, as a teenager with Olympic aspirations, I think the greatest challenge for me, it was never physical. It was like serious FOMO, like that fear of missing out, for me, was brutal. I missed out on parties, I missed out on movies, high school sports events, date nights, the list went on. I always missed out on the fun, and I know this because I'd hear about all the hot gossip on a Monday when we showed up at school. In my day and age, we didn't have social media where it was instant, and you got to see what you're missing out on in the moment. I think that probably would have been worse. So from a young age, it was actually like all about the business. And I think I was super resentful of this sometimes, especially in my teenage years. And I think commonly for a lot of athletes, if you can stay in it past the years of 15 to 17 or 15 to 18, then you've got something, because that's when a lot drop off. During those years, I was either training or sitting in the stands at a competition somewhere on the other side of the globe. And again, sometimes I just wished I could be a normal teenager. That said, my attitude shifted in a huge way when I traveled to my first major multi-sports games event, the 1994 Goodwill Games in St. Petersburg, Russia. While on a helicopter tour with Team USA, on my 18th birthday no less, traveling over top of all these amazing sites, historical sites, Hermitage Winter Palace being one of them. Pretty sure we weren't supposed to do this and defame the statue, but there's a few pictures in my gallery over the years that bring back some pretty good memories. So this Goodwill Games event, I have to say, was for sure like a TSN turning point for me. Or maybe, as Oprah would call it, one of those aha moments, because I realized that I wasn't missing out on anything back at home. I realized that this was way cooler than sipping a warm beer around a fire deep in the bushes with my buddies. It was a privilege to be flying all over the world representing Canada. And the better part of it was that it was on Diving Canada's dime, no less. A little harder to enjoy those perks now. So after this event, I was totally committed to the process. And I felt like if I was going to elevate my game, and I wanted to be the best, I had to go train where the best were. So for me, at that time, half a national team was in Calgary, and the other half a national team was in Montreal. And being an Alberta girl, I stayed west and I moved to Calgary. So people often ask me, how can you possibly comprehend what it means to be a good teammate when you specialize in an individual sport? And to be honest, I had to think about it for a second, but it always kind of offends me when people ask me that question. Because yes, I competed in an individual sport. And yes, I was solely responsible for my performance when I stepped out on the end of the board. I couldn't blame it on someone else who didn't pass me the ball. It was my job to go out there and finish it. However, I couldn't have become the athlete I was without amazing teammates around me every single day in that training environment. We pushed each other, we saw each other at our best and at our worst. So many years of blood, sweat, and tears training together. Training co-ed, I trained with guys and girls. That's a different dynamic for sure. It's a really cool one. And I think we remain really, really close friends 20 years later, which is something very special I take and hold close to my heart from sport. So being an individual athlete within a team family also taught me how to be happy for the success of others when they shine, and when they shine brighter than you. This generosity of spirit is especially challenging when you feel you've outworked, you've outperformed, or simply more deserving than your classmate, colleague, teammate for that grade, that promotion, that playing time. Often, my teammates and I were competing for the same spots on teams. When you go to the Olympics, top 2 at Olympic trials, go, that's it. It's tough when you beat your teammate who's one of your best friends and you know how badly they want it as well. Sometimes, or when they make it and you don't. Sometimes the results aren't fair, or you feel that there's some level of politics in play. I hate to break it to you, that's reality. It's really easy to be happy and gracious when things go your way and you're the one who's shining brightly. It's a lot more difficult to be gracious when it's not. You'd do well to kind of adopt the art of grace in defeat. Whether you end up participating in a traditional team or individual performance setting in your classes or out in the workforce, the people around you are going to play a really critical role in your individual success. Choose that environment wisely. And, more importantly, reciprocate and give back the support responsibly. Never underestimate the impact of your actions on those in the team around you. So, moving away at 18 to Calgary, it meant I got to work with this guy, Tong Wei. He's a world champion and represented China on the 10-meter platform. And to give you some context, like the Chinese divers are kind of like NHL hockey players in Canada or the Tom Brady NFL football players in the States. They are like a big deal. They're super famous. Their pictures are on the walls in the airport in China. So to say the least, he had legit street cred, in my opinion, when I went to work with him. He'd done the work, and I understood the mental game better than anyone I've ever worked with. I trusted his plan and his process for me. I didn't always agree with his approach, and trust me, we battled royally at times. But I always respected his expertise, and I believed in our shared vision. And that's something someday, when you are in a work environment, or even right now as you're in like a team environment doing group work with your classes, you gotta buy into the process with each other and stick it out. At those high levels of training and competition, I didn't need or want a pat on the back when I came out of the water. I knew when it was good, and I knew when it sucked. Making small changes at the top of your game are the hardest to do. So you can't look at suggestions as a personal attack. I really learned to appreciate the constructive feedback because I know it came from a great place of wanting me to be better. And at the end of the day, I feel it made me a stronger athlete and a more resilient person. I love this picture because it was taken probably this past spring. My coach and I were at the same event, unbeknownst to each other, and I was judging and he was coaching. And he now is the head coach for France. So I heard this little voice one morning at breakfast. Hi, Eryn, and I looked up. I hadn't seen him in over 15 years in person. So yeah, we for sure hugged it out. There's a little bit of emotion there because this man played a really important role in my life, but we spent so much time together. For me, between the ages of 18 and 24, I saw this man and my teammates more than I saw my family, more than I saw my friends. I was training, as I had said earlier, like 5 or 6 hours a day, usually 6 days a week. So I really, really lived my life in quadrennial time frames, and there's a word for your dictionary. Those are just the 4-year planning Olympic cycles for us. That's how I planned, that's how I lived. Everything is around my training. So I put this together, kind of just to give you guys a little perspective on what a week in my life looked like between the ages of 18 and 24. It was pretty busy. There wasn't a heck of a lot of time for downtime. And when I did have downtime, most of the athletes in this room can probably attest, you're either hungry or you're tired. Who wants to write a paper? But it has to get done, so you're hoping you don't hand in something half-assed. You want to try and do a good job. Self-care, sleep, hydration, and nutrition, those things were all critical. You know, without your health, you can't train, you can't work, you can't get the job done in the classroom. And these are all things that you can control. Your health and how you take care of yourself, you can control those things. Being injured or sick is an athlete's absolute worst nightmare. So I spent a lot of time at physio and massage, trying to keep everything moving the best I could, especially in those last 2 or 3 years when I was basically eating Celebrex for breakfast most days. Often I'd take semesters off because I was away 2 or 3 weeks at a time, competing and traveling between January and July. So I tell you this, mostly just to share with you that there were many times when the challenges of juggling it all kind of wore me down. That pressure to maintain my world ranking and the funding that was tied to it, in addition to everything else on my plate, kind of gets to you. That's a lot of pressure. I always love this analogy because in sport, I genuinely believe that there's sort of this unwritten expectation to have a thick skin or to maintain this cool, calm, stone cold exterior perfection, never to show emotion or appear weak by asking for help, never to let others see that you're not okay. And you definitely never cry unless you legitimately need medical assistance. And I think this is an area where I can really relate to our student athletes in my role with the PACE program, because I just understand the unique demands on their time, right? That expectation to perform and the challenges of finding a healthy balance that allow for success in all areas, and it's always a challenge. Balance is kind of elusive. For all of you, juggling heavy course loads, training or travel, part-time jobs, potentially having a family or other obligations, balance is difficult to achieve. It's always a work in progress. So what I want to say to you on the note of that is that it's not selfish to prioritize yourself and your health. It's a necessity if you want to be successful. I wasn't kidding earlier when I said this was kind of like a cool job that I had. It was very much a full-time gig. So just shifting gears for a sec here. Yeah, who is successful and why? Angela Duckworth, she's a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and she's a best-selling author of this book, Grit. She's spent years asking this question, trying to kind of uncover the common denominators that predict success. She interviewed elite military graduates. She interviewed top corporate executives. And of all things, she even interviewed spelling bee winners. All in an effort to determine what matters more, talent or effort. There's a ton of discussion around this. Science has shown that continuous effort toward and in pursuit of a long-term goal is in fact the biggest predictor of success. Duckworth refers to this concept as grit, and she suggests that we can grow our grit and we can improve ourselves daily. It was my responsibility to do the work. More importantly, it was my responsibility to do that work without the guarantee of success or instant gratification. I had to learn to love the process of mistake making and figuring out how to improve over time. Not sit there and feel sorry for myself because it wasn't good enough. Taking one step forward and at times 3 steps back over and over and over again, it's frustrating, it's exhausting, but you know what? It's still progress. In grit, sorry guys, here's a little math lesson for you. Duckworth states that when effort's applied to talent, you acquire skill. It's pretty easy, right? And when you take that skill and you apply effort again, it leads to achievement or success. So, as much as talent matters, effort counts twice and matters more. The effort is in your preparation, which, as we discussed, includes your self-care, attitude, the time you commit to getting the work done. So if you're sitting there right now thinking you haven't won the talent or the IQ lottery, that's okay, because you alone can grow your grit. One of my favorite lines in the book, when I read it, was, "Enthusiasm is common, endurance is rare." Lots of people have motivation and get really excited to start something, but very few people have the guts to stick it out and see it through to the end, through all those ups and downs. In the long run, this perseverance and resilience is going to trump talent every time. So I think kind of what I'm trying to say here is that if you want to achieve what others haven't, you need to be willing to do a lot of stuff most people won't. So I read another book, Outliers. How many people in this room have heard of the 10,000 hour rule? So a few of you. Okay, so Malcolm Gladwell theorizes that the 10,000 hour rule, which in his words means practicing something like a specific task 20 hours a week over a period of 10 years-ish. That's going to make you an expert in whatever that field or particular skill set is that you're trying to master. So this theory kind of piqued my interest because I was curious about how much work maybe I've put in to diving over the period of 10, 11 years that I was in the sport. So I did a rough calculation, just based on 27, 28 hours a week, because sometimes it was 35, sometimes it was 25. That's about 4 to 6 weeks a year for rest and recovery, and I just multiplied it by 11 years. This is roughly what it worked out to. So if you add in maybe the 6 years of gymnastics I did prior to that, there's maybe an additional 14 or 1,500 other hours we could throw on top of that over a total of 17 years. So while the 10,000 hour rule may be one researcher's theory, you can see that both of these experts demonstrate there's validity to the importance of repetition in a very purposeful and intentional way over a prolonged period of time. Long story short, to achieve success, there aren't any shortcuts. I wish I could tell you something different, but there's not. The next steps in my journey took me to the very place I kind of dreamed about as that 7-year-old girl, the Olympics. My first Olympic Games were in Atlanta, Georgia, in 1996. And that's actually where I celebrated my 20th birthday as well. You do feel a little bit like a rock star, signing autographs for the spectators at your venues, or while strutting around town doing the tourist thing. I remember in the Olympic Village cafeteria, celebrity athletes like the USA basketball dream team were sitting at the table next to me, just eating like they're normal. They eat. They're right there, little starstruck. I remember I got to go and watch Andre Agassi, who is a tennis legend, play a match live. So some of those things are pretty darn cool when you get into that Olympic environment. I marched into the stadium with Team Canada for opening ceremonies and watched Muhammad Ali, the greatest boxer of all time, light the cauldron. So there's so many distractions in this Olympic Games environment, and I have to tell you, it's the one event that truly lives up to its hype. Yeah, you think it's about the athletes, but it's really about television and who can weed out those distractions and all the cool things that are going on around them. Before and after most events, there's media requesting to speak to you. Your events can start at 10 p.m. to accommodate television. So sometimes you're competing at times when you're used to sleeping. The athlete village is always abuzz with like that nervous excitement, anticipation daily. And every day, a new fantastic result for Canada is celebrated in a really big way. And that energy and pressure you feel in that environment, it can be really difficult to tune out. I'd won the Canadian Olympic trials, and with that overstated sense of confidence, I finished 21st. The girl I beat at our Canadian Olympic trials, she went on to win bronze at the Games. So for sure, that was a little dose of humble pie. There's such a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And you need a little bit of both to go out there and truly believe you can be the best. I genuinely believe that. But it's really easy to get swept up in your own press and get ahead of yourself in that moment. My first ever experience in that Olympic environment, in that moment, felt like a complete failure, rather than a learning opportunity and a starting point for me. I was just super embarrassed. Following the Games, I took a little bit of time off, which is super common practice, just to rest and recover. But roughly a year later, I qualified for World Championships, my sport. So in my sport, there's the Olympics and there's World Championships, which are the two biggest ones where the best in the world are. The night before I left, I went out for dinner with my now husband, and I don't recall the restaurant, but I do recall the meal. I ordered this like super creamy, delicious seafood dish. And I think I even treated myself to a glass of white wine just to kick off the week ahead of me. And in retrospect, I probably should have stuck with the reliable Alberta steak, because a few hours later, that heavenly dish that you see there came back to haunt me with a vengeance. I don't think I could have scripted a more tragic ending to my evening. I had food poisoning. You should have seen me, like all night. I pretty much slept on the bathroom floor. I was curled up around that toilet bowl, throwing up till about 6 a.m., just in time to get up and go to the airport. En route, I remember I was sitting in the passenger seat next to my boyfriend, throwing up into a Sobeys grocery bag. Super fun. And all I kept thinking on that drive to the airport was like, oh shit, this is not good. I can't be competing at Worlds in 4 days. I'm puking my brains out. So the flight attendant was kind enough to situate me in the back of the plane near the bathrooms. And I appreciated the VIP service in that respect. The majority of my 5-hour flight to Calgary, from Calgary to Mexico City, was spent here. I just wanted to take you there with me for a moment so you could feel it. But I was bent over this beauty most of that flight. We arrived Monday, and my event, as I said, was until Thursday. By the time we landed in Mexico City, 4 or 5 hours later, I think my stomach had settled, but I still couldn't really eat or drink anything. I couldn't actually train the first 2 days that we were in Mexico City at World Championships. Just shaky, didn't feel good, and you're not going to get on a bouncy, moving diving board doing dives that come back toward the board if you don't have your bearings. I wasn't looking to crack my head on the board, nor were my coaches. So the focus was absolutely on rapid fire recovery, getting food back in the system, hydrating, resting, recovering. Again, going back to all those things to set yourself up for performance that you can control. I had 1 day of training before I had to compete. Somehow, I made it through preliminary rounds. I advanced to the semifinal, maybe because I wasn't thinking at all about the result. I was just thinking about getting through the competition, one dive at a time. And I made it to the final. At the World Cup, top 6 for the final. So I had 1 day of rest, and in that time, it was actually kind of cool, because my roommate at that competition, Eryn BB, she did something that was historical for Canada. She became the first Canadian woman ever to win 10-meter platform. So I remember that moment. It's like those goosebump moments where you're jumping up and down in the stands as teammates. We're all crying. We're like, holy crap, she just became world champion. And then I remember thinking, how the heck am I going to follow that up tomorrow? Thanks, but congrats. It was really, really amazing. So 4 days after I was hugging the toilet bowl, I found myself staring at a World Cup final. I think I was ranked 4th going into it. I was so nervous. I do remember this. I was so nervous. My hands were shaking. Like if I held them out, I was literally like shaking, standing on the end of the board, shaking. My legs felt like jello. I think I had to go pee in between each dive because I had that nervous, like, oh my gosh, there's 5 dives in a final. And I really tried my best just to focus on one dive at a time, pick one element to focus on. It was a rare moment in 11 years in my diving career that was near perfect. It's something I can only describe to you as a state of flow. Looking at the end of the diving board, it was honestly like staring at the end of a dock. I didn't see the judges, I didn't see the pool deck, I didn't see anything around me. I'm a diver who never looked at the scoreboard during an event because I didn't want to be distracted, knowing how I was doing, or being aware of what was going on in the rest of the field. When I came out of the water after my last dive, I stared up at the scoreboard. And a year after I placed 21st at my first Olympic Games, and by the absolute narrowest of margins, this happened. I became world champion in that moment by 0.12. Like, in my sport, that's less than half a point from one judge. Because the way the sport is scored, it was so close, and it could have gone either way, but it went my way that day, which was pretty cool, I have to say. The moments immediately following on the podium afterwards, I don't actually really remember. They're very, very foggy. Bit of a blur. In my wildest dreams, I don't know if I truly believed that I would ever be a world champion, but yet somehow I had envisioned myself there a million times. Watching my flag raise, hearing the Canadian anthem, it hadn't fully sunk in that I was best in the world for a moment, maybe until this moment. It was really surreal. Later that evening, I remember being back in the room with my teammate Miriam. We were sitting on the bed across from each other. Both had our world champion gold medals, our hardware. And she kind of held up her glass, and I thought she was going to say, "Congrats, well done on the world championship, very cool." Instead, she kind of just toasted my new sponsor, salmonella-infused seafood linguine. So kind of cute at the time, wasn't what I expected, but in this instance, having food poisoning probably was the best thing that happened to me because it stopped me from worrying about an outcome and focusing on an outcome, something that hadn't happened yet, and made me think about the process, one step at a time. How do I get there? How do I get to the end of this week and survive? I didn't get to be on a Wheaties box, unfortunately. But at the time, this Impact magazine was a huge honor. And I have to say, it was really, honestly, it was the coolest thing, one of the coolest honors in my life, to wear that Canadian maple leaf on my chest and represent our country. And while I'd love to stand up here and tell you that it was always easy, that it was fun because I had a goal I was passionate about. That's just not the reality. There were failed, incomplete dives in practice and major competitions, and a lot of teams I didn't make. There were so many imperfect days of wipeouts, self-doubt, and a lot of tears. Many moments spent pondering my next steps. There's times that I wanted to quit. I just didn't want to do it anymore. I wanted to be normal. I didn't always know if it would work out, but somehow I just believed it could. So I just think you have to try, and you have to keep trying, push through those hard moments. So, because I'm an Edmonton girl at heart, this is one of my favorite quotes by the great one. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's scary to try and fail. Mostly because we get embarrassed about what others think. Our pride and our ego gets bruised so easily. It takes courage to go out there and measure yourself against the best in the world. In your class, on your team, amongst your coworkers. To put years and years of hard work on display for other people to judge and critique, and to potentially fall short. Mistakes, fear, and disappointment are going to deter you. That's reality. And it's going to happen often that you have moments you fall short or are disappointed. But the one thing you are guaranteed to do is fail if you don't even try in the first place. In the third year of my business degree, Finance 317 at the Haskayne School of Business, it's the capstone course most people try and fail, but you need it to graduate. It kicked my ass. I failed it the first time. And I love to say that's because I had an 18-month-old child and I was tired all the time, but I'm not sure it's really fair that I blame my toddler. I got lost really early in that course. I didn't ask for help soon enough, and I should have known better because math is something that was always hard for me, always a challenge. I had to work 10 times harder in a math or statistics or some of the tougher economics courses that had the math parts in it. Who finds math fun in here? Oh, just a few people. Interesting. I had to repeat it, and when I finally figured it out, I aced the course, loved finance, and I went on to complete a finance major. And mostly, I think it's because it was hard, and I hadn't initially been good at it. I wanted a challenge, and I think part of me wanted to say, take that finance. I kicked your butt. But the point I want to make here is that the gift mistakes and discomfort give you are the opportunity to pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, and go figure out how to be better. Remember that Duckworth's findings in grit, that effort counts twice? That effort, combined with standing up and facing adversity, those are our greatest teachers. In the 3 years following the big World Cup win, I had a newfound momentum and belief in what I was capable of. I think I now genuinely believed. I won the 1998 Commonwealth Games, brought home a bronze on the lower 1 meter board, and I was a 3 meter springboard. I won Pan American Games at home in front of a Canadian crowd, and I think in my whole career, this was probably one of the most special because I got to do it in Canada. I remember being under the water, and I could hear like the roar of the crowd every time one of us from Canada dove. And when I came out of the water, you couldn't even hear the scores. When I stood on that podium in Canada, and the entire venue was singing the Canadian anthem, there aren't many more moments I can say in my life that will top that. Even being in an Olympic venue doesn't come as close to the pride I felt in that moment. In 2000, 6 months before the Olympic Games, the World Cup was held in the Sydney Olympic venue. So very often before the Olympics, there are test events that are held for athletes to get used to the new venues. At that event, I finished third behind the 2 Chinese divers, one of which was the defending Olympic champion. And a few months later, I went on to win my second Olympic trials. So I felt like the course was really set for me to just go get it. Everything was, the stars were all aligned. In Sydney, I made sure to take it all in and enjoy the moment. But I couldn't help feeling that there was this like tremendous pressure that I hadn't felt in Atlanta 4 years earlier. I was nervous. Yeah, it was absolutely a privilege to be there and to be representing Canada for a second time. But I wasn't there to just experience the games and have fun. I had a job to do. And that job was made really clear to me. My job was to bring home an Olympic medal. Over the years, I often found that the greatest obstacle for me was often in my own head. It was sort of this loud, self-deprecating voice telling me, I can't. Learning to listen to that quiet voice in your head that says you can, that was hard work. Believing in yourself takes a lot of repetition and a lot of patience to keep going back to that voice saying, I hear you. It's not very loud, but I hear you. I kept reminding myself of all I had accomplished and all those little wins along the way over the last 4 years. And I was really grateful for the support that had allowed me to be here, given it another shot for Canada. So it was the day of my preliminary in Sydney, and I felt like the stars were aligned. This was going to be a great day. I was ready. This was my time. This was my moment. And normally, I could do my 3rd and 4th dives in my sleep. But for whatever reason, on that day, I don't know if it was just the adrenaline or if I got ahead of myself thinking about the end result, but I clearly over-rotated them. I went on to nail my last dive, and I finished 20th. 1 spot better than I had in Atlanta 4 years previous as a rookie. And as we all know, they don't give out medals for 20th, last time I looked. I fell short of advancing into the semifinals by less than 2 points. I let my country down. I disappointed my coach. I shocked my teammates. I feel like I brought shame to my family and friends, these people that had supported me, believing in me sometimes more than I believed in myself. This, for me, was beyond devastating. Like, I think I felt my heart break in that moment. The next morning, I woke up to yet another article about myself entitled, Bulmer Bounced. Ouch, right? This article focused on how I'd choked a second time, double bombed at the big show and didn't deliver when it mattered most. The details that stood out mentioned how I was a 20-year-old in my first disastrous Olympics. And for the next couple of years, I heard the raps, can't handle the pressure, the crowds, or control my emotions, can't manufacture the big dive when it matters most. The reporter was a jerk, but he was right. This one stung a bit, kind of like lemon juice in a paper cut. After so many positive articles I'd read, written about me, or that I'd read maybe here or there over the years, this is the only one I remember in detail. And I have to tell you, there aren't many things in this life that can humble you quite like an epic fail in the public eye at the height of your career. What I didn't know until I read the article is that I was ranked 4th going into the 3rd round and 38th coming out of that first miss. Unpredictability is absolutely what makes sports so exciting, because it's about who shows up on that day and who wants it most on that day. But that's also the most frustrating thing about it. There's no do-over. You don't get a retest at the Olympics. I've since learned, I hate to break it to you, but that is the reality, and it's in life, and it's part of the life formula in every single arena you will step into from this point forward. So, on a happier note, following the games, the closing ceremonies are always an awesome party. On Route 2, we bumped into this guy. How many of you guys know who Yao is? Yao Ming, right? So I was a little starstruck, but he's an NBA basketball player from China, and he actually grew up in the training center with my coach. So my coach pretty much made him take this picture with me, and I think why I like it is you can see he's clearly super happy and pumped, right, to be having a picture with us. And the other thing that is unique about this picture is this is before the day and age of the selfie. So somebody else actually took this picture for us. There's a lot of really cool things about being involved in the Olympics, and this was part of it. After the games, I spent some quality time with my title sponsors here and there, while they enjoyed the balance of their 25th wedding anniversary with me in tow. It was a beautiful blue sky day on Bondi Beach. I think we were at some little cafe, sitting down having lunch together. And I remember being there with them, but I wasn't present at all. I was still sitting there feeling sorry for myself because I was pissed off I hadn't won an Olympic medal. And to be quite honest, I was probably overheated, sleep deprived. I was certainly hungover after 3 or 4 days of drowning my sorrows in the Olympic Village and in Darling Harbour in Sydney, at all the little places we went. At the end of our lunch, my dad slid this little green box across the table to me, and I'm gonna have to read this so I read it properly, but he said this to me. "We know you don't feel like a champion in this moment, but your mom and I want you to know how proud we are of everything you've accomplished. And we really hope that someday you will value what this little coin represents as much as all the other gold medals in your collection." So I opened that little box, and it was a Royal Australian Mint collector's coin from the Sydney Olympics. This is what it looked like. And it had the word achievement written on it. And I remember I looked at this little coin, and all I could think was, great. I just blew my brains out and lost the chance at an Olympic medal, and you're gonna give me a stupid coin? Like, I didn't say that to them, but that's how I felt in that moment. And I'm pretty sure my disinterest and lack of appreciation was probably evident. I was so wrapped up in my grief that I didn't appreciate the significance of their gift. Before my epic fail in Sydney, the double bomber, this was my family send-off dinner. And when it came to my parents, there was rarely a discussion about practice or the competition on the drive home or even at home. They never critiqued skill or performance. The only thing they ever talked to us about as kids growing up had to do with character and work ethic. Home was a safe place to unplug from the pool. I could recharge and retreat from all those external pressures and expectations. I was so lucky to share this with my family. They were the people closest to me, and they were the best cheerleaders I had in my corner. And aside from my dad and my siblings, all of the strong and influential people you see in these family photos, my in-laws, my grandmothers, and my mom, they're no longer alive. 9 years after these pictures were taken, I held my mom's hand as she took her dying breaths and lost her battle with ovarian cancer. That was true heartbreak and loss.